Posters! Such an exceptional networking opportunity, and yet so many researchers consider posters second-rate compared to presentations. They often invest so much time in preparing and even in practicing their research talks, and comparatively so little time in their research posters. Well, perhaps you strive to create an effective poster, and if you need help with that, I have a handout for you. But are you also preparing how to present your poster? Or do you assume that once your poster is ready, so are you? After all you have to do is stand next to it and answer questions, right? And of course, all researchers are going to flock to your poster, right? And they are going to read absolutely every word you wrote on there, right? Have you been to a poster session already? Crowded, noisy hallways with posters all over the place. So much to see, so many people to meet, so little time. How do you make other people care about your research work? How do you make them understand just enough of it so they can decide whether or not your poster is relevant to them? If it is, engage in a meaningful exchange with you, and possibly even follow up with you after the conference. Well, that's what this video is all about, presenting your research poster. Now, a poster is just a medium for telling a research story, so let's start there. When you are reporting on research work, what do you include? And in what sequence do you include it? That first part will also help you prepare the poster itself, of course, but the benefit of a poster session is not so much the poster as the conversations you will be having about it. So we must discuss how to interact with potential viewers from coming to leaving, and that will be a second part. Still, before you can interact with anyone, people have to find you, to come at the very least in your line of sight. So in the third part, we'll discuss ways to advertise your poster, as it were. Not commercially or aggressively, but still. So, can you tell a research story? And I mean face to face. Well, that's something I can easily test in my interactive sessions. I ask the 25 participants in front of me to introduce themselves. They have to say their name, something about their research, and 2 additional items. And then, without advance warning, I ask them 2 questions. I say, be honest. Out of all you've heard so far, what percentage did you actually understand? Now, these are 25 PhD students from the same university in the same training program on communication. You would expect the answer to be 100%. In practice, it's hardly ever more than 50%. Then I say, give me an absolute number this time. Of these 25 research topics, how many made you care? Well, the answer to that question can be counted on the fingers of one hand. It's 1, 2, very occasionally 3 or 4. I've run this exercise with hundreds of groups over the last several decades. It's always the same. My conclusion is this: when PhD students tell about their work, half of the time we don't even understand what the heck they are talking about, and if we do, we usually find it boring. Let's change that. How about we start from a concrete example, one that I made up on the basis of a paper I received recently. I imagined how the researcher would have introduced herself in one of my doctoral seminars, probably something like this. Hi, my name is Monica and I developed an unsupervised autoencoder-based anomaly detection algorithm using a dynamic threshold approach to perform falling detection based on accelerometer data. Did you get that? If yes, I'd be impressed, or perhaps you already read that paper, but I'm guessing that few people would understand that sentence, especially in spoken format. Why? Well, mainly because of the words. And I can identify 3 challenges related to the choice of words here. First, researchers often use technical terms that the listeners may not be familiar with, especially if they are not native speakers. Here, for example, I could not immediately place the word falling. Well, a foal is just a baby horse. So at a conference of veterinary medicine, people would probably know, but at a conference of machine learning, which is more likely for this paper, then the word foal would be entirely out of context, because nothing else in this sentence is about horses, right? On top of that, foal is used as a verb here in the sense give birth to a foal, so it's grammatically more complex. And if you do not get that very meaning, then you just don't get the story here, and that is an obvious first problem. Second, and more subtle perhaps, is the use of needlessly complicated words or concepts. For example, accelerometer. Oh, you can figure that one out by yourself, I'm sure. It is a device to measure the acceleration. Right. Acceleration of what? In the context of a mother horse giving birth to a baby horse? What exactly gets accelerated and why would we want to measure that, right? Well, this here is just about detecting movement, specifically the movements of the head of the mother horse. It's just that physically you cannot detect movement without an external reference frame. You can only detect acceleration. So these detectors technically are accelerometers. But this is not what it's about. Why don't we just say based on the head movement of the mother? Is that too simple or something? Well, the third vocabulary issue here is not in the words themselves, but in the combination of these words and potentially of many words. Look at the unsupervised autoencoder-based anomaly detection algorithm using a dynamic threshold approach. You probably understand every individual word in there, but do you understand the whole? Do you have an image coming to your mind when you hear that? Do you get what the novelty here is, what the author's contribution is? Choice of words is the main reason why we may not understand other people's research, or at least not fully, but it's not the main reason why we fail to care. Usually, when we don't care, it's because we don't feel connected to the topic. Of course, you might be thinking right now, well, what can I do about that? My topic is what it is. If people do not feel any personal interest about it, that's that. Come on. Trust someone who's been around here. You can easily make me care about any research topic. How? Well, by inserting what is entirely missing in my example so far, namely a motivation for the work presented. The first question to answer is, why do anything at all? And the simplest, most effective way to answer that question is by stating the research gap. Gap between what and what? Well, between the current situation, what we already have on the one hand, and the desired situation, what we want to have instead on the other hand. I so strongly recommend that you include both what we already have and what we want to have, because it's the tension between the two that expresses the motivation, really. A classic counterexample is a researcher saying that they are trying to develop a new test for coronavirus infection. And as an audience, you would go, a new test? Why are you developing a new test? In other words, what is wrong with the tests we already have? If you don't tell me what's wrong with what we have, I don't understand why you want something new. In contrast, if you do tell me what's wrong with what we have, I immediately understand what kind of new test you want. Tell me, for example, that current tests are too slow. Okay, I get it. You want a faster one. Huh? Now, how detailed the research gap should be depends on your audience. Do they know what you are talking about or not? But one way or the other, you want to start broad with something that almost anyone could relate to, and then progressively narrow down to the specific research gap you tackled. And now that you made them care about a research gap, you can tell them what you did about it. Because now, and only now, it's relevant to them. In other words, don't focus from the start on yourself. Start from the other person, from his or her interests, and then smoothly move to your own work. And if you did a good job of that, then their next question will be, well, did it work? Did you bridge the research gap? So now you can tell them about the outcome of your work briefly, because all of this should take 1 or maximum 2 minutes, as we will discuss in just a moment. But before we do, let's apply all of this to our falling example. How about we say something like this? As you probably know, horses can be incredibly expensive animals, so horse owners take no risk with the birth of foals, of baby horses. Hence, they monitor the mares, the mothers, to detect the onset of delivery and to intervene if needed. That's obviously labor intensive, and it would be good to detect foaling automatically. All methods of machine learning developed in the past required manual input and supervision. As a major improvement, I developed a so-called unsupervised autoencoder, one that can detect unusual movements of the head of the mare. My system works great, actually. It could detect 100% of falling onsets, but admittedly with many false alarms. So what I'm working on right now is a dynamic threshold to limit the number of false alarms while still guaranteeing falling detection. And now that you know how to tell a research story, when and where are you going to tell it? Well, on the poster itself, of course, but beyond, let's take a chronological look at a typical interaction moment between yourself and potential viewers during a poster session. First thing to do is to attract passers-by to your poster. Don't Don't just watch them passing by in front of you. Talk to them. As with all conversation starters, and all the more so if English is not your first language, you may want to prepare in advance what I call pick-up lines, really. For example, are you interested in improving the yield of solar cells? If they say yes, invite them to your poster. If they say no, you can leave it at that, or you could ask them, what is your main area of interest then? And see what they answer. Of course, you first need to get a chance to talk to them, and that is largely a question of body language. Above all, show that you are available. Open your body, look at them, and especially smile to them. Show that you are happy to be there. If they look back at you, and all the more so if they smile back, you can talk to them. You can deliver your best pickup line with the right tone. Friendly, enthusiastic, but not pushy, okay? And now that they come to your poster, tell them about your work. Now, the idea is to engage them in conversation. Remember not to subject them to a monologue of yours. Give them choices. You know how you like to read the abstract of a paper in order to decide whether you want to read that paper or not? Well, same here. Give them first a 2-minute version of your research story. And I mean 2 minutes, not 10 minutes, not even 5, 2 maximum. Which means this is something you want to prepare and practice using what we said in the first part of this video. If you improvise on the spot, it will probably be long and wordy. After those 2 minutes, if they prove to be interested, well, you can elaborate. You can discuss your findings in more detail. In other words, you can establish more clearly how you have reached your conclusion which in itself was already in your 2-minute research story, right? If you prepare well, especially your 2-minute starter here, it's not that hard to handle one person. When other people come to your poster in the middle of an explanation, that's harder. And I don't have a surefire trick to share with you. Simply be aware of everyone, okay? Don't lose yourself in a dialogue with just one person. Try to include newcomers one way or another in the discussion. One option is to recap briefly what you have said so far. If that does not seem possible, then just tell them that you will be with them shortly, which is also a reminder for the person you are talking to that you are there for everyone. Now, everything you know about conversation applies to poster sessions too. Ask questions, listen actively, strive to understand the other person's interest or approach instead of just focusing on yourself and your research work. And as always with networking moment, try to anticipate how to end the interaction in a constructive way, perhaps with some further action, possibly as simple as connecting on LinkedIn. One thing you can certainly do after a meaningful discussion is give a printout of your poster, just one sheet in A4 format. If your, let's say, A0 poster is readable for viewers standing 1 meter to 1.5 meters away, as it should be really, then it will work well in A4 format. And you can use the back of this A4 handout for your contact details. You don't have to give an additional business card. Just put one phone number, one email address, possibly one URL. Skip the postal address. If they need it, they will ask for it by email or by phone before sending you something by postal mail. I find that a paper handout has got something, well, tangible about it, But if you prefer electronic, yes, you can create a PDF version and then give the people you talk to a little card with a URL, or perhaps you use a QR code or something like that. That is the chronology of a typical poster interaction from pickup lines all the way to contact details and follow-up actions. It supposes, of course, that you will have relevant passers-by in your area of the poster session. Well, how do you get them in the first place? By grabbing every opportunity to advertise your poster. So let's discuss that, shall we? The most relevant and possibly mandatory opportunity to advertise your poster is the so-called teaser session, during which researchers deliver 1-minute presentations about their posters, usually with a single slide, if any at all. How do you make an audience care in just 1 minute? Well, we know this by now, don't we? With a research story. You remember how that goes? First, you answer the question, why do anything at all? By stating the research gap as a funnel, focusing down. Then you answer the question, what did I or what did we do about this gap? And finally, you tell them whether you were successful, in whole or in part, at bridging the research gap. In other words, you give them your main conclusion. Now, is this the same research story as the 2 minutes rundown of your poster to start a conversation with passers-by that you attracted with your pickup lines and body language? Yeah, except, of course, that it's half as long. Oh, the motivation part might be exactly the same, really, but the outcome part will be different. In your 1-minute teaser, just state your conclusion. That's all they need to know for now. In your 2-minute starter, especially with your poster right next to you, you could already mention briefly the findings that led you to the conclusion you drew. In fact, if your 1 minute is supposed to be a teaser, you might wonder whether you should include a conclusion at all. Well, people are not going to come and see your poster for suspense. They are going to come if they believe they can learn something useful from your research. And your conclusion is a big part of what makes your research potentially attractive to other people. So yes, do include your conclusion. Why do something? What we did? What we concluded? Is this 1 minute then? It should be just a little less, because we still need a way to start and a way to end. First, make sure you get people's attention. Make sure they give you a chance to tell your research story here. That's the equivalent of pickup lines, and it's again both what you say and how you say it, verbal and non-verbal. To use the same example as before, you might exclaim, "Horses, such amazing animals!" And then you continue, "But some of them are therefore incredibly expensive, so horse owners take no risk with the birth of falls," etc. The whole story, right? Keep the attention getter short, yes, but do make a strong first impression. Similarly, think of how to close, how to wrap things up. That's something we discussed for your conversations later during the poster session itself. For the teaser, well, you might just say, "I hope to see you at poster 27. It's action-oriented, but not terribly original, of course. You could also make the link to your attention getter. For example, something like, "If you love horses, or if you love machine learning, come and talk to me." Again, intonation will be important to leave people on a strong last impression, like the first impression. All of that must fit in the 1 minute of your teaser, whereas your rundown of 2 minutes, well, maximum 2 minutes, remember? That does not include the small talk before the conversation, nor the wrapping up at the end. Next question. What do you show during your teaser, assuming you have the right to show just one slide? Well, what exactly are you trying to achieve with this one slide? I can think of 3 options. Option 1, show the poster. No one is going to be able to read much more than the title, of course, but reading is not the point. Here you want people to apprehend the poster as a whole and then to recognize it at a glance during the poster session. Now, if you do not think your poster is particularly memorable visually, and that's fine, of course, you could show just the top, so the title of your poster and your name are readable. Option 2, clarify visually either the research gap or your conclusion, but not both of them, okay? By using a schematic, a diagram, a graph, micrograph, photograph, something you can meaningfully point to as you explain. Now, it's not always possible, and in any case, it should be simple enough, right? Something people understand at a glance, and you only have 1 minute. In fact, it's probably an illustration that is displayed somewhere on your poster, but not necessarily. Option 3, include the title of your poster and your name and 1 photograph. This one to create an atmosphere or something. To use the same falling example again, I would suggest, guess what? A photograph of a mother horse and her baby, of course. It would give visual clues for words such as mare and foal in the title of the poster. Now, this is not the type of illustration I would recommend for the poster itself, as it could easily distract from the discussion of the research, which is really machine learning in this case. But for a 1 minute teaser, yes, you might consider it. We said a teaser session is the most relevant moment to advertise your poster, but it's not the only one. A conference typically offers many networking opportunities, such as receptions or even just coffee breaks. You meet people, at some point you talk about your work, they get interested, well, invite them to your poster. How about you prepare a little ad, 1/3 or 1/4 of an A4 sheet perhaps, with again your mini research story, and of course when and where to come and see your poster, together with your contact information perhaps on the back again. You give this at the conference instead of a business card. Not aggressively, not out of context, but whenever relevant. If people are interested and they come, it's a win-win. So you see, a poster is really about a research story. Why do something, what we did, what we concluded, which you deliver in various formats. On the poster itself, with whatever evidence you can reasonably include for it, as a 2 minute starter of a meaningful yet flexible conversation with 1 or more interested people, and as a 1 minute or perhaps a 1 paragraph teaser to advertise your poster, ideally together with a relevant illustration. Across all these instances of communication, strive for consistency. Always write the title of your poster in exactly the same way, your name too, even the contact details on the little ad and on the back of the A4 handout of your poster. And for the poster session itself, make sure people find you and recognize you, meaning you should look the same as for your 1-minute teaser. If your hair was tied up for your teaser, don't let it down for the poster session. If you were wearing your glasses for the teaser, don't wear contacts for the poster session and so on. You might even consider wearing the same or similar clothes on both occasions, but the priority is, of course, your face. Speaking of which, I find it helps to have a photograph of you, a headshot on your poster, especially where there might be several discussions going on at the same time nearby. People look at your poster, they see your photograph, they look around and they go, ah, there is the author of the poster, let's go talk to him. And if you tell me, too late, my poster is printed already, or if it's going to hang in the hallway of your lab afterwards and the photograph would no longer be relevant, then make it an add-on. Have a separate picture, this size maybe, which you affix temporarily on your poster for the poster session, perhaps even sticking out at the top so it literally stands out. Well, lots of recommendations, meaning a lot of extra work, I know, but trust me, it is worth it. Posters are all about networking. Make sure you get the most out of your poster session.